Welcome back to day 34 of our chess journey to 1500 ELO on chess.com. Let's jump on ahead into our browser and look who are and see who our opponent is going to be rather. This seems to be a new country to me. We got a Razor Lynch from Australia. 1d4 as per usual, and we will go for the Queen's Gambit. They play the Queen's Gambit declined, and here we could go for this line here, but I'm not quite sure as to the follow-up. Let's play our knight up here, which I think might be the main line. Alternatively, this might be so. This is probably a bit slow, but it does disallow us rather from pinning this knight as it develops. So I think we will play our knight out here then. And if they go up here, I think queen to c2 is a pretty normal move there as a response. They move the knight up, and we do have to make a decision here. I don't want to close up our bishop like this, so we might just bring it out London style, like this. Alternatively, we could be looking at this kind of a Catalan-esque setup. But as I'm not quite sure as to how we would keep this pawn afterwards, I think we will go for the more concrete move here, getting our bishop out like this. They play another slow move here, which I guess seeks to play b5 and open up this bishop and their rook potentially as well. I think we'll just play solidly here and move our pawn up to e3 here to prepare to develop our bishop and castle. I am looking for tactics in the position here, but I'm not really seeing any. So let's play up here. And now we are also defending this pawn. They play this bishop move, and I think, as I mentioned, we will go on ahead and play queen to c2 in response. This doesn't win the bishop, as they would have this move, defending it. We will play up here, and now I'm expecting our opponent to castle. Once they do, we have to make a decision here of whether we go here, I think, or kick this bishop. I don't think we have to worry about playing this move, which is a bit more passive yet, because our opponent can't pin this knight because they played e6. I'm not seeing any immediate threats here, so I think we'll go on ahead and kick this bishop first, and if they do take, we take with our queen, keeping our pawn structure, and now we get the bishop pair as well. They jump in with their knight. I think queen back to c2 should be decent. Just want to make sure all of the knight moves here are covered. I'm not seeing any threats, so we will just jump on back like this. I am considering a backwards knight move like this at some point to dislodge this outpost, and they can't immediately back their knight up with another minor piece. However, they could play f5 to solidify the knight. And then we could try to break apart their pawn structure here. Whenever they play this move, we probably win a pawn, so they would have to take like this, and the f pawn wouldn't be defended the same way. We have this move as well, developing the bishop and also hitting the knight here. Let's have a quick look. They could capture here, but then we get a strong center, I think, and I think we would be happy with that. Then we could even, I think, move our queen up and hit this pawn. I'm not seeing a good follow-up to this. So let's develop our bishop and prepare to castle before the position opens up. Now if they go here, as I mentioned, I am looking at this move. And then I think they would be left with a weak diagonal here towards their king. Our opponent still has a lot of pieces on the back rank, but some of them do have a task right now. They drop the knight back, and now I think this is likely to win a pawn, because it will open up an attack against this pawn, and it will be attacked twice. Let's calculate this. If our opponent captures like this, we could go like this even and trade queens, or we could capture with the bishop and still be up a pawn. If we see this capture, we can still capture the pawn here, so I'm quite optimistic about this capture. And if they defend this pawn, I think we just snap to capture another pawn to make sure we are up a pawn here. We do have to make a decision here. We still have 12 minutes, so we have a lot of time to think. Which capture do we prefer? I think I might prefer this, because then we would be able to simplify the position to make our material advantage more felt. If we just trade down from this point, we are going to be up a pawn, and our opponent will have an isolated pawn in the center of the board that we could target and potentially be up a second pawn. If we play here, their queen is going to have a couple of moves, here or here. But I'm not seeing a good way of punishing their moves. So I think I want to go here instead, and this would target all of their queen's potential moves. Now wherever they move the queen, we can capture it. So I think I am rather happy here. If they move this bishop, for example, down here, we would have had the option of taking this pawn. We go into this line, and now they might have some difficulties defending this pawn, at least along this d file here, as we currently control this square. They develop their knight, and here I would have considered, I wouldn't have. If we had hit this knight currently, we could have tried to dislodge like this, but they still defend with a rook. Here I think we should just be solid. So I'm looking at castling here. And then afterwards we could coordinate our pieces and create some threats. After castling, I'm expecting them to play this. That might be a bit annoying, but we could just jump our knight in here, perhaps. Then they would capture and win a pawn. So in this case here, I think even would we want to move our knight backwards? Potentially not. Then we might have this bishop move coming, as currently it's not hitting a lot either way. We do have to make sure our bishop here doesn't get trapped, but it does have two diagonals to escape along, so a move like this, for example, doesn't trap it. Okay, let's proceed with castling here. This knight can't do a whole lot right now. We could look at remaneuvering this knight to hit the weak pawn here, but it's currently four moves away. I have mentioned this once before, but how I look at it is the squares diagonal to the knight are 2 moves away. Those squares here are 3 moves away, and 2 squares diagonal to the knight are 4 moves away. So that's why I know this is immediately 4 moves away. So here I think we might play b4 at some point, but the most critical idea here is probably playing on the c file. I think it's going to be difficult for our opponent to hit this pawn chain here, as they would have to probably push the f pawn all the way up here even, which might be awkward in terms of king safety, and it will take some time. So I think here we have time to take the c file, as we won't have the option of playing on the king side with our rooks here. They play the bishop move, and now we have to make a decision. Do we drop back? I don't think we want to allow our opponent to double our pawns here. We don't want to create unnecessary weaknesses. So after this, and they could play with whatever really. Let's say they play here, and we probably drop back to some square. This might even be an option, but it might not be the best move. Either way, once we go here, they will probably go back, and we do need to defend our bishop, so that when we move our knight, it will just be a trade of bishops and we won't lose anything. Well, let's move back here as we looked at first of all. I'm expecting either this move or this move. They capture, so now we're currently left with the bishop here for quite insufficient compensation, I think. This will also immediately help us to develop our bishop to hit this isolated pawn. So I think we are quite happy to see this. And I'm curious as to what our opponent is planning to do in response. I don't quite see what this move does. I think the critical approach would have probably been playing on this open file. Doubling up rooks here doesn't do a whole lot, so this move is probably only left with the idea of bringing the rook over for a kingside attack. Now, though, I want to look at the options of hitting this pawn. It's only defended once. And if this knight moves to allow for the rook lift, this pawn will be left undefended. Unless, of course, they play this knight move. Let's have a look here. Do we have any other ideas? I think this bishop could be left here for the time being. this backwards knight move could hit it, or our opponent could try to grab the c-file, but then I think even this move would be a strong outpost and it would lock this pawn in place. Or so I would like to say, but I'm noticing our opponent would be able to play this move, after which they would pick up our bishop. But here in this position, I think we'll go on ahead and play a rook to the c-file. I'm not quite sure as to which rook would be the best, but I think the f rook, simply because this rook doesn't have any prospects on those files over here, I think. Whereas this rook could still support some kind of a pawn push or defend the pawns. So let's move up. This is probably going to be expected here. And then we'll just go ahead and see what we play in response. We don't want to capture their knight, first of all because it would cost us the bishop here, but also because it would help our opponent get their pawns back together. We want them to keep this weakness, I think, on d5, so we could use it as a target. Now this move does allow our opponent to defend this square. And that's important because this is our main way here, or idea of applying further pressure here to this pawn. I'm seeing an interesting tactic here. I want to play this move, and at first glance it might seem as though we are losing our bishop like this, but this move allows us to capture here with a check and win material, but at the same time we threaten capturing and then taking this pawn. After this move though, I think our opponent might play like this. And then I think they might have the renewed threat of capturing here, but not straight away, as they would still lose to this move. I still like this move, but I want to look at the rook capture, but then we just win material as we would win the exchange. Now what move should our opponent play here? This is the obvious move. And if they do jump in like this, we would have this response, which would be a skewer of the rooks. So this doesn't quite work out tactically for our opponent, I think. Let's try to calculate this, as this move seems to be okay at a first glance, as long as you don't miss this move. Is there a good response? I'm not seeing any. So here I think our opponent is kind of crumbling. It might not be a complete crumble, that might be a bit incorrect, but this does lose a pawn. This is probably no good, so we can expect our opponent to capture with the rook. And then we take this pawn, and then we threaten capturing their knight as well, because we will have two attackers. So I think we'll go on ahead here and capture the knight and see how they respond. We do lose our bishop here advantage, but we will be up a second pawn, and I think I like our chances here quite a lot. We would be happy to see this capture, so I'm expecting the rook capture. I think we'll go on ahead and play this move. I'm not seeing any argument as to why we wouldn't. And now if they move the knight, We could threaten this, which hits both of those, and they would have to keep this pawn defended. It's currently defended by this rook, but it would force our opponent to keep a rook defending the pawn at least. This backwards knight move drops another pawn though, so this might be awkward for our opponent. Let's say we get the next move here and our opponent does nothing, then this will either break their pawns apart, or we would get this, and we would still break their pawns apart, and then we would go in like this and hit their weaknesses. I'm liking this defended passed pawn in the center, which is probably going to be a massive asset to us as we move on into the endgame, which arguably we could say we are already in. So I'm looking at different options here, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of moves for our opponent. This is an interesting move though, as after this they would be hitting our pawn, but I think we would be happy breaking their pawns apart. Let's have a look at this. Or like this. We still break their pawns apart, and we could always play b4, I think, to keep our pawns defended. Do we have any other options? I think we might just go for the direct approach by trading down material in a way that should favor us. Now we have this move, and I think it's important to note here, if they play a5, I don't think we want to capture, because then we won't have those connected pawns over here, and they might become weaknesses. If they play this move, I think we might go in ahead and defend like this. So if they capture, we are able to trade down in a way that favors us rather, and we would threaten doubling up our rooks on this weakness of theirs. So let's go up like this. It might have even been better going for this approach instead, but I think I like this a bit as well. This should permanently disallow our opponent from pushing their c-pawn, because now we control these squares 2 times with pawns as well. So this is probably going to be a bit difficult for our opponent to maneuver, and I think our plans here in this position are quite simple. We just want to maneuver our rooks in a way that we target our opponent's weaknesses, and we have a single file through which to do so, so we are going to have quite easy moves here. Our opponent, however, has to come up with a plan of breaking apart our structure, I think, and creating some counterplay, which is going to be difficult. This move, I think, doesn't do a whole lot. They might threaten playing this, but if they do, we might play like this, and we would defend this pawn. Let's have a quick look here. And here they can't do a whole lot. This doesn't do anything, I think, and we could just proceed like this. If they capture, I think we might go for this capture, and I will be quite happy with the following position at least. There might be an argument for playing this move though. Simply disallowing all of their mobility here, and if they take us, I don't think this is quite that bad. Our opponent can't remaneuver onto this file here, so we would take it first and target their weakness. So I think we'll go for this actually, to simply disallow them from getting any counterplay against our king side. So now they have to make a decision. They could look at a move like this, I think. What happens if we capture in that position with the rook? I don't think I would mind this. Although they would probably have the option of capturing this pawn on the a file, but it would help us trade down rooks. I think all material we trade is going to favor us because we are up 2 pawns. They capture, and I think we want to create the connect 4 here, and I don't think we want to capture like this at least. Let's go like this, and now I think our opponent is going to have difficulties, as this rook can't do a whole lot. So I think we might go for this maneuver in a maneuver here, and I don't think our opponent is going to be in time to defend it. But here they could have this tricky move. But if we go in like this and they go here, then we could go up here, and if they go back here, we just win the pawn. So let's go up like this. I don't think a4 is that important here, as if they push this pawn, it's going to be easier to take, as it won't be defended along the b file by this other pawn. At some point here we might look at getting our king into the game. But first I think we will try to target their pawn. And now I think this king move might be a bit too slow. Simply because they allow us to take the a pawn, because now this is going to be too many moves away for our opponent. Probably. Let's calculate. Here they could get into this position, and this might be a bit awkward. So if they go here, which they don't, okay, then I think we'll just grab this pawn on a5. And we could play with this past a pawn to create some play against our opponent. They seem to try to get in like this, which I think is a solid plan. But I don't think it should be that dangerous for us. It is a tricky way of playing, however. I think first of all we might want to get our rook up here, and then we could start playing over here, I think. This would cut the opponent's king off from this, and it would still target this pawn, so it might be difficult for our opponent to play with their rook. This might not be the critical approach. We should have maybe moved our king earlier to oppose theirs. Now I think we might have the idea of playing our king up a bit. But first of all, I think we'll play like this, I think. This king positioning allows them to move this rook finally, as now this pawn is defended by their king. We have to be a bit careful here with our time. Let's have a quick look at this. This would be a threat, which I am in fact liking. There might be some of you screaming out that I should involve the king at this point. You're probably right. But I'm not seeing anything as forcing, at least, in a similar amount of moves. But yes, we should probably centralize the king here. It seems like our opponent is quite uncertain of what to do. And now I think we have an option of just moving in, and I think all of the moves we have made here has improved our position, whereas our opponent is in an awkward spot. I think we should move this pawn up first, so we could meet this rook move by defending our pawn. So here I'm quite optimistic, but we have to be careful considering our time situation. I think we could move our king here, so we could just go like this once they move the rook. There we go. And now this pawn is defended, and if their king moves to try to hit our rook, we will be hitting this pawn still. Now they try to make some counterplay here. First of all, I think we'll just centralize our king. Now they can't infiltrate us. And we do still have a majority here as well, which I think is going to be quite important. I think we'll go on ahead and play f3. So I was looking at playing this, but then this would break apart our pawn structure and they could get some counterplay. And now this would still keep our pawns rather protected, but it might also threaten this and this, and then their king would be knocked away from the defense of this pawn. Is this a move? I think this does not work, as we do still have e4 here, and their king would have to move back and we would win another pawn. If this is played, we probably still have this. So I'm quite happy here. Let's go on ahead and grab the pawn here. They capture, we capture, this is forced. And then we capture this pawn with a check. And now I think our advantage is overwhelming. It's going to be difficult for our opponent here to deal with all our advanced and defended pawns. I think we could just push up here with our king as well, and we should be quite happy. I think we could play a simple h3, and if they push, we take, and they can't advance a pawn. Alternatively, we might just be able to threaten them here immediately, because this I think doesn't do all that much. And let's go for this. I think there should be pretty little counterplay to our current position. We can just move up, and this pawn mass should just decide the game. Here we might even have had rook to b7 now. Now if they play this, for example, this checks the king. But this doesn't work out quite how I hoped for it to. Because they might move here, and then this is no longer an option, as they would capture. Let's move our king up first. And then we could just push our pawns. We could still afford her to lose even a couple of pawns, considering our material advantage. In the current position, I think we want to keep this pawn on c5 to defend the rook. Or we might go like this, but then we can't push the pawns in between. So I think the position we want to go for here is probably going to be something like this. They go for a counterplay with the rook. But what happens here? I think we would just overwhelm our opponent. We could go for this check first. And they can't go onto any of those squares here. So we might see this move, followed by a7, for example. And then they probably have to keep the rook here, because their king can't defend the pawn advance, because our rook cuts it off. So let's look at this. No move here works because of this. So the only way of defending this is probably like this. And then this move should seal the deal, forcing a promotion. So yeah, this is probably the only move that works. As all of this is probably coming in a bit too late after this promotion. I'm not seeing any stalemate tricks here, and we just have to be careful. We still have 1.5 minutes here at least, so I'm quite optimistic. This, if they go here, we take the rook. And if they don't, say they play up like this, for example, we just promote. This is a pretty standard tactic. Once we are one square away, we move a piece onto the onto a file the pawn connects, or sorry, that's gibberish, onto a square our pawn threatens, and then we can go for the promotion. Let's just promote. There might have been a better move here, but I don't quite know what it would be. Here I think we just escape the checks. After this, they have nothing. If they move a pawn, we even have this fork here, but I think we probably have a checkmate instead. This would be a mate in one, and I think they can't defend that mate, as currently their king can't move. So I think this is probably mate in two in terms of evaluation, as they can't move the king, and they can't do anything about it. So they would have to play like this to delay the mate, and then this is still mate in one. Well, that's our game for today. Perfect. I'm feeling really happy with this game, as I feel like we played quite well. Thanks a lot for the game, Eraser Lynch. This brings us up to 14-13 ELO. Let's have a look at the game review. We played with 93.6% today, and our opponent played with 82.7%. We had a pretty normal Queen's Gambit. Let's bring up the evaluation bar. So this gets a bit easier to follow. This was in fact the best move here, which I didn't expect, but looking in hindsight here, it makes sense that this might have been a threat together with our bishop. It just felt a bit slow to me, moving the pawns like this, because it invests 2 moves into doing so. We should have apparently captured here, but this was just about the same strength apparently. They moved up here. Queen to c2 was the best move, as I mentioned. This was not the best move, however. We had a pretty significant lead here, but I'm not quite sure why this was the best move. Sorry, this might be a move too far back. Or actually it's not. The green arrow does tell us to move this pawn up to g4, after which the evaluation seemed to drop. Why is this good? See, it drops back to equality. So this might just be a mistake from the game review. Sorry, I misclicked. Let's head on back into the position we were looking at. Which still makes no sense to me. Yeah, this is probably just a mistake, and it seems like the evaluation might have forgotten its white's move and not black or something. I'm not quite sure. Either way, we played this. And now we were quite happy getting the bishop here. This was all correct apparently. Capturing with the queen was best. And here we should have apparently jumped in, but this was pretty similar in terms of evaluation. And I think, to be honest, I prefer this move. We just want to be as solid as possible here, as this is a bit abstract. It doesn't win any material, but this does secure our solid position at least. This was a slight mistake. We should not have moved backwards, but rather jumped in. I might have missed something here, which I did in fact do, because for some reason I missed the fact we could capture with our bishop and we wouldn't lose a pawn like this instead. Well, that's life. We went back and this was apparently a miss. Their best move here was rook a to c8, taking the c file as we looked at. Well, in this position we got this move in. And apparently here the best move was rook to d8, defending this pawn. So even if this knight is taken, we can't capture it. They played like this, and we found this pawn win, rather. We should have doubled up here prior to capturing, but I thought now that we were at least staring at the knight here, we could trade down material as quickly as possible when we have the chance to. This move was best apparently, and this pawn capture was quite okay. This idea seems to have been decent, and we did play the best move here. Apparently we should have moved back here, I guess hitting their pawns like this. I guess this was better because we still hit this, but we hit this as well. I had the idea instead of playing a rook here because it would cut off their king, so this a pawn becomes a threat. So we do push it. We should have apparently kept on pushing it, which we did now. And here we get it all the way to a6. Centralizing the king was best. And here I guess every move is decisively winning, but g4 was apparently... Yeah, that's... Why is this better? This feels like quite computerish. The best move here is e4 plus. Yeah, this was just another way of winning pawns. And here we would have gotten 2 pawns at the same time. well, this is not that easy to spot, I think. We played this instead, still creating the same threat of e4. We played it and got to this position. And here I think it was quite trivial. This was apparently a slight mistake. We should have played our rook up, which we did do eventually. And here we got our checkmate. Well, that's our game for today, guys. Thanks a lot for watching. Once again, thanks for the game Eraser Lynch from Australia. I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Bye bye.